Hi, creative friends. This is Ansu, and I have been playing catch up with my video editing from, I think, from February. And this video has been kind of on my mind lately, so I wanted to start with this one. I have been really going through a difficult season health wise because it is um, kind of a challenging time for anyone in their 50s. In their early 50s, we as women we go through menopause, but I have an autoimmune situation as well that kind of exacerbates that, so it amplifies it. And so health-wise really challenging me to really stick to kind of any routine at this point. And so I've really fallen behind on my video editing, but I'm okay with that because my channel is just a place for me to share about my art and my work life and my creativity. And as an artist, I want to talk about how we can grow over time and how we can grow our art. And even when we go through difficult seasons or challenging seasons, I feel like our art is something that God has given us as a little companion to help us process life and help us work through difficult seasons. And as an artist, I also believe it's very important to practice your art on a regular basis. And if I tell you a little bit about my own story, I basically started out as a teacher and felt that was the calling on my life. But I've been creative all of my life. I remember at school, friends and teachers comment on my creativity, and I typically have an ambivert personality, but just a little bit more introverted than extroverted, which means that I'm basically a dreamer. So I like my own little world, and creating art on a regular basis helps me express what is going on in my heart and in my mind. And because I'm a believer as well, I feel like that's a way of communicating what is going on in my spirit. And so my art, I think for me, is something that should inspire me faith wise and should reflect the God that I love. Okay, so that's the one thing. Then we all go through these challenging times where we find that our art is not what we would like it to be, or that we kind of feel we get stuck in a rut of doing the same old, and artists get bored easily. So it's very important for us to get stimulated on a regular basis. So when we get that inspiration, our art tend to flow a little bit better. And so artists talk a lot about creative block, and I don't really believe that it's such a big issue because I feel like if you really know your temperament and you know what you need, you will give yourself the things that you need to keep your art flowing. We're going to talk about a couple of things that's important in this regard, but then what I did for myself in the season that I find myself in is to enroll in an online art course. There's a local artist called Henri Erasmus, and she is creating this art course over time, trying to inspire ladies who are not really full on artists, perhaps paper crafters or creative in other ways, but to help stimulate beginners and just help them develop the basic art skills that they need to grow their creativity and the art in them. And so I enrolled in this course not because I'm a beginner artist, but because I felt like I needed just to shift my focus a little bit outside of the normal things that I do in my own studio, and just to inspire my art and blow a little fresh new life into it. And so the question then arises, can we find inspiration from following or learning from other artists? And the answer for me is absolutely yes. Copying someone else's art just for the sake of copying. I'm not really, as an educator, behind that concept. But I do feel like we can learn from the processes of a variety of artists, and through that, it can help us to develop our own thumbprints and the art that we make that is unique to ourselves. And a lot of artists, if you talk to them, will tell you that the art that they make, they only have respect for their own art if it is their own art, if it's original, if it originates from them and not from some reference photo or another artist and what they do. But if we are going to sit for hours and watch another artist create, what we see, what our eyes observe, and what we see will in the end then be reflected in our own art making. It will show up. The swirls and the little techniques and the specific style that that artist that you are watching is showcasing will show up in your thumbprint in the end. So you have to be careful also in that sense, um, of who you are following and the art that you're making. For me as a believer, it's also very important that I kind of get to know the artists that I follow. There is a lot of artists on social media that is sharing their process and sharing the work that they do. But in the end, we have to also realize as believers that we have to be careful, because there is a spiritual aspect to art making, because it is something that God has placed in us, an aspect of himself being able to create that reflects also what is going on in your spirit. So if your spirit is not filled with God and his light and his love, that will be reflected in your art. That's why there's a lot of artists that make really visually horrible art. And this is a controversial topic, but for me, it is something that I can easily see what is going on in your spirit through the art that you make. And it's very important to me then to make sure that the artists that help shape my own art um, are, are believers, but also have the same values as myself. And so enrolling in Henri's art course was a no-brainer because she is a believer. But then going through this art course, there's a lot of kind of valuable things that we gain from kind of collaborating in that sense of being on the same kind of topics and talking about the same things and experimenting with the same products or the same kind of processes and techniques. We're going to learn a lot and develop it in that sense. So it's a fun art course and I can really recommend it. But at one point I really realized that I have developed over a long period of time a way of making my own art and also learning that is unique to me. And so I have kind of ended my journey at this point with the art club because I feel like I have gained enough inspiration and it sparked enough kind of new, fresh joy in my art making that I can continue kind of with my own journey. But I did find a lot of benefit from being part of Henri's kind of art club and also kind of watching her create art and listening to her own art theory and the things that she believes is important for an artist to kind of gain the basic skills and the foundational skills that you need to build on. And just going back to basics a little bit was good for me to just look at how I create my own art portraits. I basically am a portrait artist, but also mixed media artist. And I like water-based kind of mediums like watercolors and water-based crayons and acrylic paint. those are the things that I like. And then I'm also a paper craft artist, so I like using paper in my art making, so collaging and mixed media art, layers with paper, etc. And so Henri has introduced a lot of that also in her art making projects. In the process of this, also she does regular challenges, creative challenges in her open Facebook group, which is not the same as the members group, which I really thoroughly enjoyed. And she also had us make art like you used to do in kindergarten with potatoes and all sorts of very basic art products. And so that's really good for any artist to just go back to those basic things of just enjoying art and putting your fingers in paint and just kind of really embracing the freedom and flow of experimenting. And that's one of the things that I want to talk about, is the basic things that we need to grow as artists is to have that regularity, number one. So making art often, trying to kind of be creative on a daily basis is great. If you can't do it daily, I feel like don't put that pressure on yourself if you're going through some challenging things, but then come back again and again. Have a little art journal that you keep with you that's easy to reach, and have a couple of products, limited kind of products that you can reach for, even if it's just a drawing or a sketchbook or a couple of crayons, and just create, just doodle, just put something on a page. Don't be afraid of a blank page. I feel like a blank page is opportunity knocking for me. I don't fear it. Just starting to scribble on a piece of paper can, in the end, just end up in a little cute portrait that inspires you to come back again and do another and another, and that all can lead to great art that you're making. So the regularity factor is important, to make art often. And then being consistent, trying to employ that consistency as much as possible, despite the fact that artists can sometimes be all over the place with different projects, and they're always kind of jumping from the one project to the next or in between different projects at the same time. And then you go through seasons where you don't make art at all. And for me, is I embrace those seasons as times of researching and observing and getting new ideas and taking notes or making notes in a notebook, even if it's not art, and that's okay too. And then experimentation is important, and Henri introduced a lot of that in her art course, and I really enjoyed that thoroughly. And then the joy factor, I think just getting to a point where you just enjoy making art for yourself, even if it's not to sell or to put out in the world or share on social media. There's a lot of the art that I make that I don't share. A lot of the art that I made during my time in the art club that I did share on social media, or snippets of it, but not necessarily everything will end up on social media. I feel like, and Henri also encourages that it's important to sometimes just make art for yourself. And then as part of the experimentation, also to get to know your supplies and kind of experiment with different techniques. And this is where kind of collaborating with artists or joining art classes and things can be helpful, because you can learn new techniques that you can employ in the end in making your own art. In my Revive course that I brought out a couple of years ago, I talked about the process of making art as being three different distinct phases. The naturalist phase is when you go out and you take your little knapsack and your scissors, and you kind of collect ideas from different people and from nature and from all around you. And then you go into your studio, and then you're a scientist and you experiment with the things that you've collected, with all of those ideas and techniques and styles you see other artists create with. But then in the end, you have to get to the DJ phase. And the DJ phase is the most important, because that's when you're going to make thumbprint art, your own art from scratch, without a reference photo, to challenge yourself to see how your own art without the help of anybody else would look like in the end, because that's where the original factor comes in and where you start to make a difference and an impact in the world with your own art. Just copying artists, there's a lot of masters that kind of taught that way. They got students into their studios and they trained them to make their art the way that they made it, and so that's just duplicating someone else's style. In the end, you can use all of these things that you've learned, but you have to get to find out what your own art would look like. And so, do a course, yes. Join an art club, absolutely. In the end, you need to sit down with your own self and you have to experiment and discover what your own art looks like. And so for me, throughout, even when I used Henri's art projects, I would also definitely try and stick to the originality of my own art. And so at the end of this video, I'm sharing with just a walkthrough of some of the art that I made while being part of Henri's art club. There's a lot that we can talk about in the end, and I feel like experimentation, that's important, regularity, consistency, trying to be as consistent as possible, the joy factor, finding that joy and holding on to that, just enjoying making your own art, getting to know your supplies, so that's also part of the experimentation process. Finding inspiration all around you, whether it's from nature and life or adventures that you take, or from other artists. And then things like using reference photos to get a starting point and to help you with your placement and proportions, that's great. But then in the end, also try to get away from that and sometimes just make art from scratch, even if it's wonky, even if it's not beautiful. But the process of just practicing your hand and practicing your eyes by seeing if you can recreate what you've learned in prior experiences, prior art making sessions, and apply what you've learned to a session where you just make art from scratch. When you do copy an artist, always give that artist credit. That's very important. Don't make art and then call it your own. It's not. You can see me make art here using reference photos that Henri created from her own art, and she probably also used a reference photo either from a magazine or from an online platform or wherever. And that's important that we can say, okay, this is from a reference photo, or this is original art by me. And then remember the observation aspect. Henri made a lot of or placed a lot of focus on the fact that we need to observe as artists. Sometimes just go out, take your sketchbook and just kind of observe, sit a while and just open your eyes and look around you and see what there is to see, and then take your sketchbook and just doodle while you are watching the world go by. That's a very great kind of experience for any artist to just sit and observe and doodle a little. I remember being overseas and doing that, sitting on a bus, and we went to museums and different places in the city, and then I just sat on the bus back to the place that we stayed and just doodled out some sketches, and I still have those sketches of the experience of that day. So that's a great experience. I remember in Saudi, we weren't allowed to take photos of the ladies there. It's against the law, and you can get deported out of the country if someone catches you taking a photo of a woman without her husband's permission. And so that was kind of difficult to take kind of memories with you of the people that you meet. And so what I did is I had a sketchbook and I did drawings of my friends that I met, and so I can look back to those drawings and I can think about the people that I met back then. And so it's a way also of memory keeping, is sketching out the people that we meet along the way, and it's also part of our art practice. So how do artists grow over time? Consistency, experimentation, regularity, the joy factor, knowing your supplies, kind of doing classes with other artists, things like joining a community of creators and creating together. I think that could be really beneficial. Learning from each other is great, but then also trying to make our own art from scratch after all of that inspiration and all of that time spent with another artist. And also then try to stick to a variety of artists that you follow and that you do classes with, not just one artist, because you might find that one artist has a specific style that you like, but then you can also just learn so much. And then if you can introduce a variety of people and their ways of making art, you can learn a lot more that way. So I constantly jump from following one artist to another because I get something from an artist, and then at one point I feel like, okay, it's time to move on. And then I would find another artist, and it might be artists who create different art, different types of art. So one might be a portrait artist, the other one might be an art journalist, another artist might be a watercolor artist. And so because I like variety a lot and like to learn different things on a regular basis, that's good for me. So try and add the variety factor. I think variety is the spice of life. Right, so I hope that you enjoyed this little video, and the things that we talk about here is to inspire you as well to kind of grow the way that you think about art and your own art, and then making that as well a priority to really just not just follow, not just make the same art that everybody else is making currently because it's trendy, but also to think about your own process, and what that looks like for you might be different to the next artist. In the end, I want to encourage you to make thumbprint art. And thumbprint art, what is thumbprint art? Thumbprint art is art that originates from yourself, art that you made from scratch without a reference, without anybody's guidance. After you have spent time learning from others and experimenting, then end up being that DJ that takes all the different things, the lessons and the techniques and the styles that you've tried to copy, and apply these things to making your own art. Start with a blank page and just breathe through it and just start and see what you end up with. You might be pleasantly surprised. I'll link Anuri's art website where you can sign up for her little art course in the description box down below, and I hope that you check her out. See you in the next video soon.